guys, here I am again on an awesome Saturday night for another Facebook Live, and I hope all of you who are at home and you're kind of sitting around, you found your way to the computer. And this is going to be good tonight because this has even made me think about my own single journey, which is pretty cool. And I just love it because I get to pass off to you the things that I have learned from looking backward at my own journey. If you don't know me, my name is Shanna Schutte, and I'm a dating coach for Single Over 30. And I am here because I care about women and about singles. I didn't marry for the first time until I was 46. And even though I really wanted to marry, that was a huge desire of mine. And so my heart really goes out to singles. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is we're going to talk about what your type says about you. So if I could sit down with you and I could have a conversation with you and you could tell me about the type of men that you've dated or the types of men that you would say you're interested, or if I say what's your type, maybe instantly a type of man pops into your head, right? Or when I use this phrase type, you might think of the way a man looks or a particular occupation. But what I want to do tonight is I want to expand that. So I'm not just talking about type, like when your girlfriend says, what's your type? And you say, well, I like guys with blonde hair. I want to expand the definition of type to also the men that you have dated or that you've had a relationship with, or the guys that you've had a crush on, right? So we're not just talking about the guy that you think you might be interested in that has a certain sort of look or a certain occupation. We're talking about the types of men or the type of men that you've had a relationship with. So before we get started, I always say this because I want to make sure that you know this, that there is absolutely no condemnation, right? So anything that I share with you tonight, I can see myself in every single one of these points that I'm going to give to you. And so I just want you to know how awesome you are, and that I'm grateful for you, and I'm rooting for you, and I pray for you guys, and I want the desires of your heart to be fulfilled. It's not that I think that marriage solves all of your problems, but I know that if you're here and if you're listening to me, if you get my emails, it's because you want to attract a marriage-minded man. You want to have someone who's trustworthy. Maybe you want to have a family, that kind of thing. And if I can be a piece of that for you in helping you in that journey, I'm so honored by that. So if there's one thing that I want you to be able to take away tonight, it's I want you to understand, and this is huge. I never thought about this, right, as a single, but I want you to understand that the types of men that you are interested in, when someone says, what's your type? Or the types of men that you've dated or you've had a relationship with, that is there because it's something that we think that person will do for us, that they're going to serve us in some way, that we're going to get something from that type of person. Maybe we think that type of person is going to make us feel valued or desired or loved or cared for, or excuse me, I need to get something to drink. Or it may be that a particular type, we might think that kind of person, without even realizing it, it might not even be cognitive or even in our heart, we're not aware, but a particular type of person or a type of man can keep us from experiencing shame or rejection or feeling undesirable. So every type, this is the big takeaway, right? Every type represents some sort of need that we have. So sometimes some types that we can be drawn to can come from a really good place, from a healthy place, and some not so good places, right? And with some of the women I coach and some of my own journey, the desire that I had for certain types came from places that weren't so good. So for example, here's an example of what I'm talking about. Everyone has heard of an older man who dates a younger woman after his wife dies or he experiences a divorce. Now, why does he do this? Because he has a type that he has chosen, because he has a need or some sort of desire that he thinks a younger woman can fulfill. Maybe to help him deal with past regret, or maybe to help him feel like he's not getting older and he's struggling with age, right? So that being with that type of person fills a need. We've also heard of the opposite, the stereotypical woman who marries or dates a man for his money, right? And I'm not pointing my fingers at anybody, but this type of man who has the moolah, right, who's got the dough, is meeting some type of need that this woman has, right, for security, for safety, for a sense of significance. And that may not come from a good place, right? So I mention these two things, and also to tell you, I know this is not you. What you are after is love, not just to have some dysfunctional need met or something that some need fulfilled that's not healthy, right? You want to be coming from a good place when you have your type in mind, or the types that you've dated. So I want to tell a little story on myself. So when I was in my early 40s, just before I met my husband, I started to feel that real pinch of not having kids, and feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm looking back at the last 20 years of my life and I'm thinking, what was this for? Why was I single this whole time? Prayed a lot about it, experienced a lot of grief, right? And I started to feel a little bit of a midlife crisis, not recognizing that's what I was feeling. So I decided at that time in my life, and it's not like I sat down and went, this is what I want. It was just something that I decided that I wanted, right? So at that time in my life, I decided that I wanted to date a younger guy with kids, because I thought, if I can date a younger guy with children, that would mean that I would be happier, and I could deal with that grief that I had of not having that desire fulfilled of having kids and all that. So I signed up for I didn't sign up, but I called It's Just Lunch. Maybe you've seen their ads like in airport magazine or airline magazines. It's where they set people up for lunches. You can meet people. So I had this interviewer call me one day and ask me what I was looking for. And I told him, well, I want to date a younger guy with kids, right? And now looking back, I think, why is she narrowing her field so much, right? And it made sense to me at the time, but why did I do that? Why was I narrowing my dating pool like that? What was it that I was ultimately wanting? What did that type of person represent for me? What it was that I wanted to deal with the regret of not having been married, and I wanted to have the desire to be loved, fulfilled, right? I wanted to be happy. But what I didn't understand is that that doesn't come from that type, right? Love is in a person. It's in a relationship. So I thought I had to have this particular type. So our type says something about us. So every type comes from some place or from some motive or some desire. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I want to encourage you as I go through these, and to remember that your type is the main thing that you're looking for is love, right? So we'll talk about that at the end. And then I'm going to tell you about my freebie for this week. So the first type that someone can be drawn to can come from a place of fear, like the fear of intimacy. This is something that we don't really think about. And sometimes when I get into these Facebook Lives, I get a little bit deeper than my normal tactical stuff, because I think it's at the real heart of our relationships. I always say that dating and relationships happen inside out, right? So they start in here, and then whatever's in here happens out here. So I think it's important to know about what our motives are. So it can come from a place of fear. So like the fear of intimacy or the fear of getting hurt. And this is the stuff that we're not even aware of. So for example, if you're afraid of getting hurt, right? Or you are just getting in a relationship is scary to you, maybe you have some dating anxiety, you might be drawn to a type of man who is an avoider, someone who can't give you what you need, someone who is not emotionally available to you, because someone who is emotionally available to you may be someone who really acts interested in you. That person isn't scary, right? Someone who maybe is really interested in you, maybe they move toward you, and that person isn't frightening to you, because if nothing's expected of you, then that's easy. I was speaking at a women's event in Southern California, and maybe I've mentioned this before, but I talked about internal vows and how we make these vows to protect ourselves from getting hurt. And there was a woman who came up to me, it was a single woman, just sobbing. I mean, just beside herself. I don't think I've ever seen anybody cry that hard at an event that I did. But she was just sobbing. And she said for the first time, she understood why she'd married 3 men she didn't love. That was her type, right? It's patterns. If we look back at our dating life, we can see patterns and why things happened. So she chose this type of man because it was easier for her. She had a dad who abandoned her, who was an alcoholic. And so that intimacy and that desire that she had to be loved felt scary. So what did she do? she married men, a type of man who did not make her feel afraid, right? Because to want made her feel very afraid. So that was her type. So this sprang from this fear of intimacy and the fear of getting hurt. So sometimes if we're operating in fear, sometimes when someone comes towards us, like I said, we'll push that person away. So our type is someone who is not interested in us, but and the type that we are not interested in is the one that is interested in us. So I want you to keep something in mind here when I talk about this type being fear, right? So wherever there is fear, there is control. So if there's an area of your dating life in which you feel afraid, it's a extreme fear, or maybe something that you've just sensed through the years over your relationship, that is something that could very well be controlling you, right? So pay attention to this stuff. I always say journaling is awesome because it helps you get to the heart of what you're all about. So a type can be a result of fear. The second thing is that a type can just be from a simple preference. And these preferences can be good or bad, such as I like tall men or I prefer short men. They can come from experiences that we've had in our life with important figures like our parents or someone else who was really important to us or played a significant role in our life. I have mentioned this story before, but there was a woman that I coached one time, and I was asking her, what are you looking for in a man? And she said, well, I really like ranchers and cowboys, right? She was telling me she likes this rugged type. And I asked her, because the truth is, like I was saying, every type that we like or that we're drawn to, it's because we think we're going to get something. That type represents something that we need. So I said to her, what is it that you perceive about this cowboy or rancher type that you think that they can give you? What do you think they're like? And she said, well, they're strong. And I knew she didn't mean like I've got muscle strong. What she meant was this guy's strong, like he's protective and he can care for me. Well, I talked to her a little bit more, and that's what her dad was, right? He was a rancher, I believe it was. And so she felt that she could get that from any guy. Well, the truth of it is not all ranchers or cowboys are like that, right? And then I also asked her, because I was trying to get down to the root of what was it that she wanted in someone. She wants to be protected and cared for. So I asked her, is it possible that another man who's not a rancher or cowboy could give that to you? Yeah, she said. I said, is it possible that a guy who works in an office could give that to you? Absolutely. So we were getting down to the root of what her type said about her. That was a need that she had. So I encourage you to take a look at what is it that the type that you like says about you. So every type, like I said, can point us back to a desire or some significant need that we have had. Sorry, I got tongue-tied there for a second. So the next one is that our type can come from a place of shame, right? It can come from a place of some unresolved guilt or feeling unworthy. So, and I've mentioned this before as well, but in case you didn't get it on another Facebook Live, there was a woman that I knew, and she was always drawn to guys, and she used these words when I talked to her about it. She said that she always dated men who were beneath her. Those were the words that she used. And she said it was because she had a horrible upbringing, a rough childhood, and as a result of that, which lots of us have sinned, we've made poor mistakes, or we've made errors in judgment. She felt very ashamed of her life and the person that she was. And so in order to cope with that shame, her type of man that she was drawn to and her type that she dated were these guys that she felt like she was better than, right? Who had rocky lives too, right? So as a result, those guys could never give her the love that she wanted or that she really needed. And so then that cycle just kept on going, right? So what we think about ourselves can really affect the type of person that we date. Next, a type of man we're drawn to, or the type of man that we date, can come from a place of lust, right? Because we think that a type of man who looks a certain way, or who makes us feel a certain way physically or in our body, or we're drawn to that person sexually or whatever, that person can give us something that we want. And what I mean is that we sometimes equate that desire and stuff with feeling like we think that that's going to give us love or belonging, right? But the one thing that is really important to remember is that we are body and we're mind, right? And we're spirit, and you cannot feed your heart. You can't feed your heart. You can't feed your spirit with the flesh. It's not possible. So if what you're really looking for is love, you have to remember that this whole chemistry thing is a whole nother aspect of the relationship. Yeah, it's part of it. But if that is too much of a focus of a person, whether you're male or female, you have to remember that first of all, and I've gotten into this a lot in blogs and stuff, that will wane over a period of time. It's not that it disappears. You should have some attraction. But the thing that will hold your relationship together and the thing that's going to make you feel awesome in a relationship is love. That stuff that can feed your heart, right? The sexual stuff is like icing on the cake of your marriage. It's not the cake, right? Love and caring and consideration and kindness and all that. And the other thing too is that person's looks change. So this kind of lusty thing can happen through sexual experiences that we've had outside of marriage. And I can tell you that anything that you do outside of marriage sexually, you bring into your relationship. And I'm not talking about just intercourse. I'm talking about any sexual experience. You bring it with you. And those experiences can affect you, right? In your marriage. It's not that can't be cleansed. It's not that we can't move on. It's not that it has to have this huge overbearing negative effect. We are forgiven, right? But it can affect us. And so I invite you that if that's a big thing for you, like if you've gotten into pornography and it's changed your perception about the type of person or type of man that you would be drawn to, then I invite you to get some help for that so that you can really get what you really want, which is love. So it can come from a type, can come from an inaccurate place of thinking or an assumption. So for example, the woman who I talked about with the cowboy thing, right? She assumed and made she had the assumption or inaccurate thinking that this is the way cowboys were, is that she was going to be protected from a cowboy. So we can attribute certain character traits or certain personality traits to a certain type of man. For example, if I say to you, these are some of the assumptions that we make. Men who are short are blank. Right? You may think, well, a man who is shorter, is not as protective or he's not as strong or whatever. And that also has to do with the need because we feel maybe more feminine in the presence of a guy who's stronger. But I want to encourage you, but again, these are about character traits, right? We want to look at a man's character traits. Or men who wear suits are blank. Maybe they're boring or they're unexciting, or maybe somebody else thinks that they're astute and they're masculine or whatever. I have to tell you a story about my husband. So my husband was an executive at an organization that we both worked at. And I automatically assumed, this was an assumption, right? I wasn't even interested in him when we worked in the same place. But I made the assumption that guys who were in those types of positions, that they were serious and that I couldn't connect with them because I am very silly. Like I have this goofiest side of my personality. I've got a 5-year-old in this body sometimes, and I just like to have fun. So I would have thought that a man who wore a suit and who was in that type of position, that I couldn't connect with him. He was not my type. Well, I have to tell you, this is totally wrong. Like, how many times have you had assumptions about a particular type of person, and that was not even correct? So these types can come from assumptions about people, and then what we can do is we end up brushing off somebody thinking that they are a particular way, when in reality, they're not like that at all. So our type also can come from a place of regret. And here's what I mean by this. Let's say you've had some bad experiences in your past. You've had some bad dating relationships or some things that really hurt you. And so what happens, So what happens is you try to fix that, right, through having a certain type. Maybe you broke up with an old boyfriend and that thing really, really hurt you, and he was a particular way. And so now you're thinking, well, I got to get somebody better than that because in order to fix what happened back there, which is a horrible strategy, right? But that type that we think that we need can come from a place of regret. That's exactly what happened to me. I had a relationship, I'm sure you've heard me mention, in my early 20s, and that relationship broke up, and I felt like I was really at fault. And so what happened was I was trying to fix that through the men that I dated, while simultaneously dating men who weren't good to me, because I was dealing with a lot of shame. I'm almost done. I don't know how long I've been on here, but I know I'm talking fast and long. All right, so also I try to keep these things short, but it never works. Our type can come from our parents. So maybe we had a very overbearing father and we decided, I'm never going to do that again. And so the type of man that we pick is exactly opposite. Again, this has to do with our need, right? Our type can come from our culture. It can come from the things that we see in movies or magazines, right? We think that particular types are certain ways it's going to meet certain needs and fulfill our longing, and those things may or may not be accurate. So I want to challenge you here in ending, that I want to give you some things to think about. So if you were going to go and take out a piece of paper or your journal, you're going to write down, men who are blank are blank. Men who are tall are this way, or men who are short are this way. Write down the things that you want, and then I invite you to challenge your assumptions, right? Challenge your assumptions about these types. Are you operating from fact? Is it from shame? Is it from regret? Is it from the type of person you think will make you feel good about yourself? And I also want to say this right before we close. Love comes from what you want, what you're looking for. And this is why it's good not to rule out people on the internet, all this kind of stuff. Love comes from a person. It comes from being seen and accepted and heard and valued and cherished. It comes from someone to laugh with and pray with and cry with, and someone who listens to you, and someone who you can do life with. Love doesn't come from a type. It does not come from a type. It doesn't come from a man if he's too tall or too short, or if he's heavy or if he's thin, or if he is a rancher or has a particular job, or even goes to your same denomination or whatever. That's not where love comes from. You have to have some core values in mind, right? You want that, but love is about two people. So I want to encourage you to expand your perceptions if you have a particular type, and if you've dated particular types of men, to go back and to look at your patterns, to ask yourself, are these types kind of standing in my way of getting what I really, really want? All right, I hope this has been helpful, and I hope it's helped you see that types have to do with desire, right? And what we really want. And if you have any questions, I invite you to go ahead and type them in the chat box. First of all, can everybody hear me okay? Is everything good? I hope my internet's working. I think it's lagging a little bit. Oh, good. Yay, there's some hearts and thumbs up and maybe someone who's mad. Anyway, okay. You guys are awesome. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Okay. So, just want to remind you, I haven't mentioned it for a bit, but next month I'm going to be talking to you, and if you haven't been getting the emails yet, I invite you to go over to singleover30.net and sign up to get my emails, because what I'm doing right now is I'm sending out a series of messages on 5 stages that lead to the wedding altar, and I have a course that's coming out next month that's especially for women, that's going to help you date with confidence and clarity, because so many times, we don't know how to get from, hi, how are you, and I just met you and I think you're awesome, to, getting married. And we get things out of order. And when we do that, it really causes a problem in relationships. And lots of times relationships end or don't progress the way that they need to, or we date people we shouldn't, we get stuck in relationships, all kinds of things can happen because we don't know what these stages are. So I'm going to be talking to you more about that. All right? So awesome to see you guys. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Oh, one more thing, I almost forgot my freebie. I'm going to paste a link below. If we're not aware of our types and we get hung up in the shame and all that kind of garbage, it can cause us to choose red flag relationships, so, or people who aren't safe. So down below for my freebie for this week, it's, I think, 5 ways to recognize a safe date. All right, I'll paste that as soon as I'm off of here. All right, thanks. Have a good night. Bye.